is Andrew Heaton, and I was briefly on 1360 AM here in Denver, and then I was on for about a year on 1015 for a couple hours a night, 5 nights a week, talking the business and politics of cannabis in independent politics. I'm also a competitive Highland Games athlete, which is, I guess, why I'm big, or the inverse of that, but they told me I couldn't wear a kilt tonight. So, and I would start with a quick story here before I introduce our panelists. You know, I was actually in Tanzania for about a year here recently, and Rwanda and some other East African countries. And on the night of the last election, 2012, the only thing, I'm in some little bar in the middle of nowhere, and, you know, there's some of these little bars that have a satellite dish, and, you know, that's it, and football games, and which to them are what we would call soccer. But they knew two things about the election. They knew that Obama had won because the Obama family's from Kenya, and it's actually a big clan in Kenya. And they knew that marijuana had been legalized in a place called, and they could not pronounce the name of the state, Colorado, for anything. But this is not just a local thing that's going on. The world is literally looking at us. I was speaking with somebody earlier about, you know, they were in China, and somebody was talking to them about, in China, can you do events, you know, can we be involved? I'm really interested. I'd love to come to America. You know, my uncle is a businessman who has some partners who are from China. They were asking him similar questions. And it's not just China and Africa, it's the world, because we've kind of pushed this drug policy through the UN on the world, and now we're the ones changing it. And with that, let me introduce our panelists here, and they're each going to introduce themselves and discuss a little bit about their area of expertise. Sitting right beside me here is Jane West. Jane West runs an edible events company. Beside her is, and forgive me if I screw up anybody's names here, Dr. Sam Kamen. Dr. Sam Kamen is a law professor from DU. You might have also recognized him from his appearance on 60 Minutes. Sitting beside him is Joshua Kappel. He works for Vicente Cederberg, which have been activists in this program from the very, very beginning. And then sitting beside him is David Furtado. David Furtado is a graduate of DU Law and has been in this from the very beginning and has a very thorough depth of knowledge, especially regarding the liability of these issues. And finally, Corky Kyle, who is also a personal friend of mine and used to be on 1015 with me. And with that, let's start off with you, Joshua, kind of talking about the history of the movement and all the nonsense that's occurred since '98 when, well, you begin.
Thanks, Andrew. There's really been a lot of nonsense in this whole movement, and things change all the time. But you know, first, just a little bit about myself. You know, I've been working in this space really for about 10 years, 8 years here in Colorado with this nonprofit Sensible Colorado, and we started really looking out for very sick medical marijuana patients. And I was also part of the core campaign team with Amendment 64 and part of the drafting committee. And Amendment 64 was the measure that legalized marijuana for all adults here in Colorado. And currently I'm a partner at Vicente Cederberg. And what we do at Vicente Cederberg is two things. One is we advocate for a responsible marijuana industry, you know, with responsible marijuana regulations and a system that works. And two is we represent marijuana businesses of all sorts, of businesses that grow and sell marijuana, ancillary businesses, you know, really any sort of business that relates to the marijuana space. And the modern marijuana movement was, you know, really started in California in the mid-1990s with a bunch of very sick AIDS activists. And they realized that, you know, for these folks with AIDS and HIV, that marijuana was actually the medicine that helped them the most. And so that's really, you know, where this whole movement started. And we had, you know, California in 1996 passed Prop 215, which really became the first state to legalize medical marijuana. But what about here in Colorado? What happened? Well, in 1998, you know, a bunch of activists got together, you know, around the same sort of principle, and they collected enough signatures to put a measure on the ballot, Amendment 20. And ironically, ironically, what happened is they didn't qualify for the ballot. That was until the Secretary of State at the time passed away, and they found a box of petitions underneath her desk. And true story, a box of petitions underneath her desk. And after they looked at, you know, after they counted the petitions underneath their desk, they actually did qualify for the ballot, and they put it on the ballot in 2000. And that's, when we had Amendment 20, and that's the system that created our very first medical marijuana laws here in Colorado. And what it did is it created a system where a patient and a caregiver could use limited amounts of marijuana, and they could grow a limited amount. Well, what happened was a caregiver, these caregivers who were growing marijuana for these patients ended up recruiting a bunch of patients. And a caregiver all of a sudden had 5 patients, 10 patients, 100 patients, and they were able to make a business out of being a caregiver. And, and most of these, early 2000s, these sort of marijuana, business, or these marijuana caregivers were very discreet. It'd be, you have to knock on the door in the business on Broadway, have the secret passcode, they let you in. And, but that all changed when Obama got elected. And, what Obama said, with the Ogden Memorandum was, he said, look, if you're in clear and unambiguous compliance with state law, it'll be a low law enforcement priority for us to come after you. He didn't say it was legal, he just said it'll be a low law enforcement priority to come after you. But then, of course, the whole world took that as Obama just legalized medical marijuana and they opened up a business. And that was, sort of like the green rush, as people, so dubbed it, even though, a lot of people don't like that term very much. And, but then, during this time, we had governments were sort of racing to catch up. We had Denver saying, like, okay, now we have 100 marijuana businesses, what do we do? And so Denver passes an ordinance, sort of regulating these businesses. And then the state of Colorado passes an ordinance regulating these businesses. And just about the time when we had all the regulations figured out, we go ahead and then legalize marijuana for everyone to start it all over again, the whole regulatory process. And so in 2012, Amendment 64 was enacted, November 6th. And what Amendment 64 did is it said any adult over the age of 21 could possess an ounce of marijuana, could grow 6 plants, and could also, hopefully if they grow, if they're growing 6 plants, they actually grow more than an ounce of marijuana, and they could keep everything that they grow. And then it also legalized a system of businesses that, buy and sell and grow. Well, I guess it created a system of businesses that grow marijuana, that produce these marijuana products, that sell marijuana, and that test marijuana. And so, on January 1st, 2014, we had the very first marijuana sale. It was to a PTSD patient, Sean Azarati, who didn't qualify under our medical marijuana program. And, that was really, about 11 months ago. So, here in Colorado, we've had legal marijuana sales for 11 months. So, at the end of the day, we've seen a lot of good things. And, there's still some problems, though, as we'll talk about, is where do people use marijuana at? There's nothing in the law that allows people, really outside of their home, a place to use it. And, with that, I'll sort of pass it off.
Hi, I'm Sam Kamen. I teach at DU. I teach in the law school, where I teach criminal law and criminal procedure. And back in 2009, I sort of got interested in why is it, exactly what Josh was talking about, why is it all of a sudden that there are all these color ads in the back of the Westward that are mentioning strains and prices? That's really weird. So I started doing some research and writing on the subject and haven't really stopped since then. In late 2012, after Amendment 64 passed, I was asked by the governor to serve on the task force that implemented Amendment 64, and we came up with sort of the rough draft of a lot of the rules that are currently in place that regulate the industry. It is important when talking about marijuana. I'm sure you guys talk with this with every one of your clients. The big sort of thing I always mention first when talking to groups about marijuana is that all marijuana conduct is still against the law. It's legal here in Colorado under state law, but it's still prohibited by federal law. That means every dispensary, every grow facility, every infused product maker, anyone that's possessing the marijuana, anyone that's selling it, giving it away, all those people are violating federal law. Now, none of them are going to prison at the moment, but that's not to say that they couldn't. Our industry today currently exists because the federal government is letting it exist. It has said, as was mentioned, that it's a low priority, and it's a low priority if you're in compliance with state law. But that is a gift from the federal government, and it's a gift the federal government could choose to take away tomorrow. On January 20th, 2017, which sounds like a long time from now, but it isn't. It's a little more than 2 years. We're going to have a new president. We know that for sure. We're going to have a new attorney general. We know that for sure. If that president and that attorney general takes a different view of marijuana than the Obama administration and Attorney General Holder have, everything could change in all the states. It's not to say it's going to happen, but the current status quo is not a tenable one. I don't know if you guys followed the Coates case. It was argued before the Colorado Supreme Court. Mr. Coates is a quadriplegic who uses medical marijuana. He was employed by Dish Network. He tested positive for his medical marijuana and was fired. And the two courts that have looked at his case so far have said, well, Dish Network has a policy that you can't use illegal drugs. Marijuana is an illegal drug, even though it's legal in Colorado. It's okay to fire him. So we exist in a strange world where marijuana is legal, but not entirely legal, and that leads to lots of legal complications, and I'm sure we're going to go further into as we go along. So I look forward to hearing your questions and to the discussion. Thanks.
David? It's your turn. You made such an entrance.
Darn phone. My name is David Furtado. I have a two-member law firm, and most of what we do is civil litigation, a lot of criminal defense, a lot of working with investors in this industry from out of state. When money comes in, how to structure the deal, how to make it legal, how to look at the statutes and ensure that the investor protected, advising Colorado owners that, you know, under the bankruptcy code, you can't bankrupt any of this because it's illegal federally, making sure that people understand the federal ramifications of what they do as well as the state ramifications of what they do. And us lawyers even are regulated by a ethical code in the state of Colorado, how we must advise people. One of the things we have to advise people under ethical rules is illegal federally. And then we advise them of the state law. It's a very tenuous position sometimes as an attorney in this industry because you're doing an industry where you're basically everything's illegal federally, and you're trying to advise people on the state law of what's legal and not legal. I'm here to talk about liability when it comes to criminal liability and civil liability regarding the consumption of cannabis at an event, what you can be held liable for. One of the things I have, which makes me an expert, is I used to own a dispensary. I currently own a warehouse where marijuana is grown. So I know about the insurance issues with that warehouse, that you can insure it for that kind of stuff, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. It usually I call them real insurance companies, not the State Farms, the Farmers, the Allstates, the American Families, but the Lloyds of London's. They'll insure that kind of stuff. And I'm going to get the microphone to Corky next to discuss, you know, that part in the legislature.
Yeah, before we move to Corky, I just wanted to mention that obviously these three attorneys, anything they say tonight does not constitute legal advice. If you were getting legal advice from them, you would have already written them a very large check. So let's move on to Corky now. Corky is a great lobbyist and has kind of the inside track on where this is heading nationwide.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, David. My name is Corky Kyle, and I am a lobbyist. And I know that may conjure up all different kinds of things in your mind, but we are a very valuable facet of the democratic process, which allows you to go ahead and interact with the people that you elect and create the public policy that allows all of this to happen. Now, I've been doing that for 35 years, and my background has been in nonprofits and small business. And I have had many clients in the marijuana industry as clients. And the purpose of that is to get them involved in the creation of the public policy that establishes the method, the rules and regs, as to how everything is going to go ahead and function within this state. As I mentioned, I've been doing this for 35 years. And it's very, very important for us to realize that every one of you out there needs to be part of this process. Now, is recreational marijuana, no, let's even go back. Is marijuana going to disappear? The cat's out of the bag. Pandora's box has been opened. You've got almost half of the states in the country having some form of either medical marijuana or, as we're seeing it spread across the country, recreational marijuana. And eventually there's going to be a tipping point where things are going to change even more radically than what we've seen here in Colorado. And Colorado has been the bellwether state. It has been the guiding light, so to speak, on this whole movement. And so is it ever going to disappear? No. Is the way in which it's regulated and the way in which it's managed by government and entrepreneurs? Yes. Are there going to be mistakes made? Are people going to be hurt? Are fortunes going to be won and lost? Yes. Because this is all at the very beginning of the movement. The same thing can be said about alcohol. When you stop and think about prohibition, when you stop about even thinking about before that, things are very, very similar. But the interesting thing, or the thing that I find most with the clients that I deal with, is the fact that they are willing to get involved in the creation of the public policy that allows this to happen. Now, whether that be on the federal level or on the state level, it doesn't matter. The fact remains that individuals can make a change. So anyway, that's my part. That's my role in this whole new development, a whole new industry, a whole new way of thinking and handling things.
Hi, I'm Jane West. I'm a professional event planner. I have my master's degree in social work from Denver University. I am a frequent mild cannabis consumer and a wife and mother of 2. And 1 year ago, I didn't know a single person in the marijuana industry. I've spent 20 years as an event planner. I produced events in New York City, Philadelphia, Houston, Washington, D.C. For UNICEF and UNDP, as well as experiential education events for 8 years with a company out of Washington, D.C., including hosting 12,000 young people to Obama's first inauguration in '09. So I created the lifestyle brand, Jane West, and I went to a handful of caterers and started producing an event series. I was only going to do one a month, just one Friday night event a month. Relative to all the other events I planned, it was really like kind of a fun pet project, a little bit of a like midlife awakening fun thing to do. My event series took off very quickly. I've been featured in CNBC's Colorado Pot Rush, which immediately resulted in me being asked to resign from my position at my job after only producing one 4-hour event. I've also been on CBS This Morning, NBC Nightline. My company was featured in Fast Company last Friday, and I was recently named Elle's most potent woman in pot. So it's been quite a year. I produced the Colorado Symphony event series that resulted in the Red Rocks event, and I also have criminal charges against me for what I've done here in Denver, Colorado with my events, which we will talk about. But the thing I'm most proud of is starting an organization called Women Grow to encourage women to enter the cannabis market as entrepreneurs at the right time, which is now. So I look forward to talking about all those things.
Well done, well done. Well done, all of you. And Jane is our only business member of the panel here. I'm sure we'll be leaning on you heavily with these questions tonight. So, everybody ready to take a question? Start the second half of this? All righty. So, first question here. A hotel has a no smoking policy in your room. So you choose to smoke on the balcony. You can drink in your room and on the balcony. Why can't you smoke marijuana on the balcony? Who wants to take this? We have 3 lawyers in the middle. Come on, nobody be shy here.
We were actually arguing about this one in the green room. So
I cheated. I showed him some of the questions before.
there were 3 lawyers on the panel. We had 7 different opinions on it. So I think it's a great case. I will reiterate that we're not giving you legal advice. But the Amendment 64 said explicitly that open and public use of marijuana would not be permitted under the legalization. So that is much like the open container laws. For the same reason you can't walk down the street drinking a beer, you can't walk down the street smoking a joint, smoking a vape pen, whatever. There has been a lot of discussion about what open and public use means. The Denver Post has reported on the sort of back and forth that went on with the Denver City Council about whether you would be allowed to smoke on the front porch of your house, the back porch of your house. And those issues are still quite unresolved. The question would be whether smoking on a balcony is open in public use, and it's the kind of question I ask my law students on a final exam. Well, it's sort of like being on the street because people can see you and you're exposing it to the public, but it's also a lot like being in the privacy of your own home or your own hotel room. And particularly in those hotels that have made smoking permissible outdoors, and I think on the outdoor parts of your room, it's difficult to see why it would be that different from smoking cigarettes. But I will let I'll let the other panelists weigh in.
Well, if I was, providing the law school answer, no, I would say that it's really about the hotel's policies. Under Amendment 64, there's a specific provisions that allow private property owners to regulate the consumption of marijuana on their property. And it's ultimately, at the end of the day, up to the hotel. And so if the hotel has a no smoking policy of any sort or a no smoking marijuana policy of any sort, then you're still going to get that fine on your credit card when you check out. So, ultimately, I think it is permitted, by the plain text of the law, depending on the hotel's policy.
Counterpoint. See, I think it's impermissible. And I think if as long as you can be seen, it's open in public. And a hotel, although it's a private place, you can enter a hotel as a public place, but it can go either way. But, if a federal officer saw you doing it, it's definitely illegal. And like when it goes to the liability, when a state officer sees it, it's about the emotion. If someone was drinking on that balcony, would anyone care? What do you guys think? No, right? We can all agree to that. No one would care. The fact that it's marijuana on the balcony, someone might care. And when it comes down to it, it comes down to the pocketbook. If you want to get a little petty offense fine, because usually open use of marijuana is a $100 fine, petty offense, that's fine, but then the problem becomes when you're looking for jobs and everything else on your record. So my advice to you would be, don't be on the balcony of the hotel where everyone can see you. Have a balcony people can't see you, because if you do go in front of a court, the question is how much do you want to spend to argue open public versus not open public. And, and that's the problem. And Josh's point may win, Sam's point may win, my point may win, and you just don't know. And like I said, a lot of it's because it's emotional. Now, personally, I think it's fine. When I read the rule of law, when the section says open public, some police officer go, yeah, it's open to the public's view. I think it's an extreme interpretation of the ruling on it, but my advice to a client would be, no, don't do that. And the civil liability, of course, like Josh pointed to, is the hotel's policy, and if they smell something in the room, they're going to hit you with that nice little fine on the credit card just to raise revenue.
Well, I think this is something that a lot of people forget, is that, well, there have been a lot of positive steps forward and a lot of positive decisions. I think all of the attorneys here, as well as your experience, and I have several friends who've had these experiences, know of horrible things that have happened that were entirely wrong, and the officers were entirely wrong. But you got to understand, as it's set up, they pretty much have the power of God, and they have immunity. So it's hard to sue them. It's hard to make them pay. When you tell them and you demand your rights, they just laugh at you. So we're going to come back to this liability issue over and over again, because that's a recurring theme in these questions here. But the question is, just because you can do it, is it really worth spending $50,000 in court to defend the fact that you can do it?
What I would do to solve the problem is actually go to a hotel that allows smoking in the room and just do it in the room. I guess what you say to yourself at the end of the day is, hey, worst case scenario, what happens to me? And the worst case scenario here is bad. It's legal fees. You might win, you might lose, and then I always have a client graduate from school that says, I have to get a job. Can you get this sealed off my record? And many times you can't get things sealed off people's records. So, and like I said, the main thing as a lawyer I look for is case law. I just need some direction. And right now in this area, there's no way to look for direction. I can't see 5 cases where they can come down this way or come down that way. And when I write letters to clients about things, I usually back it up with law, statute, something. And because no one cares about my opinion, David thinks. No, I say, based upon these 10 cases, and based upon the fact that I would hire, say, Josh, I hire Sam, I hire people to help me out, and say, hey, I went to 3 other law firms on this issue. I have an opinion from 5 lawyers that this is what's going to come down based upon this. And like I said, but that's expensive. That's why people don't like lawyers, because when we do things for you, we have to charge, and it just gets expensive. But in this area, I couldn't even go to people. You just get opinion. And the opinion wouldn't mean anything until, of course, a judge said something.
You said you should use a smoking room. So some of you work at the Marriott, right? I saw some label. So are you allowed to smoke in any Marriott? No. There's actually less than 200 hotel rooms in Denver that you can legally smoke in. But there are thousands of tourists coming in every single day just for the purpose of consuming cannabis. So what are they to do?
There is a whole new market out there of hotels around the state that allow smoking, and they are called marijuana-friendly hotels. And they're catering to the tourist business. And as long as there's a policy and there's not, as long as they don't have more than 25% of their rooms smoking rooms, they're all good to go. Is it legal? No, but it's just another way that people are trying to tap in to the new business.
I think the next question we'll move to here is hopefully a little bit easier. I know it looks like we got a tough one following that one. And what, as if the last one wasn't tough, what permit or license are required to host or execute a cannabis consumption event? You want to lead off on this one, Jane?
That's a trick question. So currently, in my experience, where if you can go and buy a ticket, if you can read about an event and attend it, then it's public. And so, I mean, at least in my experience, that's right now where I'm just waiting for something to proceed. I want a permit system for cannabis events because they are happening right now from less experienced, less responsible individuals who are selling tickets to events. There's not security. There's not people checking to make sure everyone is 21 and over. They are irresponsible. And if we had a formal permitting system, just like we do for liquor, then the police would be able to actually ticket people holding non-permitted events for what they're doing wrong, which would be holding a non-permitted cannabis consumption event. And that's what I hope to do. I actually really hope that I'd like to up the ante on responsibility of events across the board, just making sure that everyone is of age and that they're responsible, adult-only cannabis consumption events. In addition to that, my original concept for holding the events had a lot to do with public education. People coming and trying small amounts of different types of cannabis to find the type that's right for them. And by requiring all events to only be private, that element of public education where an adult that's interested in trying either a sativa or an indica or this edible or that edible is unable to go to a scripted adult event and try different items just like they would a wine tasting.
I'll just add a few things to that. There's really only one thing you can do with cannabis, which is buy it. You can buy it from a licensed seller only. You can't buy it from your friend. And you can't consume it on those premises. So we have no parallel to the brew pub model where you go somewhere, have the baked goods that are infused with marijuana, have the beer that's infused with marijuana. Alcohol and marijuana cannot be sold in the same place. A licensed business of one can't do the other. So what you need to remember is that only licensed entities can sell marijuana, right? So you need a license from the state to do that. It's a laborious background check, residency requirement, lots of difficult pieces. I think what Jane is talking about and where a lot of people, and particularly a lot of people in this room want to go is there some public event? Is there some private event? Is there some way to do a catered event where marijuana can be consumed if not distributed? And she sort of described the problems inherent in that. And I just wanted to remind people that that's sort of the only thing available unless you're going to get a license from the Department of Revenue.
Yeah, and just to add on that a little bit, I was having a conversation with a city council member here in Denver, and she's like, I really wish people wouldn't smoke marijuana in the park and wouldn't smoke marijuana on the 16th Street Mall. And I said, well, where are they supposed to go to smoke marijuana at? And she didn't have a response. And it's this sort of fundamental problem with our law is that there's really no place for people to go besides their home. But if you don't have a home or you're not from here, you really have no place to go. Or let's say you have kids or grandparents living with you, you don't want to use marijuana in your home. You have no place to go. And so, it's this issue that will have to be resolved. In Denver, we've seen a large increase in public consumption tickets. It's a civil fine, but it's still a ticket. And I think it was like 400, public consumption tickets last year. And that's because people are using marijuana wherever they can. And so, if we go back to sort of the hotel balcony issue, it's, at some point, I think people ask themselves, well, where's the least risky place for me to use marijuana? Because I want to use marijuana. I just bought marijuana, and I can't take it home with me because I'm from Kansas. And so I'm going to use it somewhere. And so the question's where? And this is a question that, I think our city leaders and our state leaders are sort of grappling with. And we've seen some communities in Colorado, Pueblo County and the city of Netherland, who have sort of endorsed a model that allows, sort of like a bring your own cannabis model. I haven't necessarily heard of any businesses operating yet under this model, probably because of issues with the state liquor enforcement. But there is some communities who are saying, look, I'd rather have people smoking these in an establishment as opposed to in our streets. But but that's sort of the lay of the land right now. And at the end of the day, we will see a place where people can use marijuana at, and with that comes special event permits.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay. Now, we got a series of questions here, so if I don't get to all of them, forgive me, but they're all kind of a similar theme. What do I do if the police show up? What do I do when I'm at, I'm planning a wedding and the bride and groom want to smoke? What do I do if I'm at a concert and everybody's smoking and it's my concert? So I'm going to kind of go through a few of these here rather than kind of ask the same question half a dozen different times, different ways. This is, I think, a good one to start off with here. Should the police show up at our event and we have guests who are under the influence, what is the best way to handle the situation? Everybody's ears working?
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate that we're not giving legal advice.
Yes.
I don't think you have to tell the police anything about people being under the influence of marijuana. Just like you don't have to be like, oh, this person over here has had 4 whiskey drinks, and this person has 5 shots of tequila, and this person had a brownie. Who cares? I don't think you have to tell the police anything. And maybe there's different opinions, but I just don't see why. Well, just my own personal bias, why you tell the police anything most of the time, in this case or other cases. But that's just my 2 cents.
So, and this kind of goes back to the previous question and the question we just talked about. And said, what are the laws regarding what constitutes a private versus a public event? And I know we talked about it a little bit, but is there a clear delineation? Go for it.
No, I don't know the
Oh, you. Are there some general guidelines?
A restaurant's a public, a place you could walk into. Let me see the quote.
You did your research here, didn't you?
Nah, I asked the brains in my law firm. She gave me the exact quote, actually, because I couldn't. Once again, I'm trying to look for the definition of a public place in the Westlaw, and nothing came up. It's public is offered or available to the public generally. Any place accessible to the public, subject only to non-discriminatory restrictions. That's the definition. The second one is a definition. So I look at a private event as something that you just can't walk into. You're invited. You're on a guest list. It's at an art gallery. You have to have a certain, pass to get in. That's a private event. I can't get in, private event. But that's, for the most people in this room, it's basically one of those issues if it's public or private. If you can just walk in, it's definitely public. But the problem is when you look at all the statutes on public and public and public, there's not some long definition of what it is and what it's not. You're not going to find that. They use the word public use it's all over the place, actually. And then I looked up the Merriam-Webster, was public, offered, or available to the public generally. And that's what a court's going to do, is look at the Merriam-Webster definition, if it's not already defined in case law or by the state legislature, which, of course, Corky should be defining this for us. But there's nothing there in these statutes. It doesn't really say public versus private. And I'm sorry for the lack of direction, but like I said, you'll know if it's public, you know if it's private. You feel it.
There really isn't a whole lot of direction, is what it sounds like. So, you know, just to touch on this here, that's in another question, kind of on the same direction of thinking here is, as an event planner, can you have somebody sign a release? Is there anything you can have them sign that will give you some protection?
We're gonna disagree.
I mean, I think there's sort of two questions. You know, is one is like the liability of having a private event where there's marijuana added and your guests are using it. You know, which is one question. And then to go back one question, that we did work, you know, with the city attorney's office in Denver to try and figure out what they meant by public space. And pretty much their position was if anyone could buy a ticket, you know, then it was a public event. And if, you know, the people who could buy tickets was limited, you know, then it wasn't a public event. You know, but then it's like, but how is it limited? And there's still a bunch of gray area. But, you know, the safe way to think about it is, you know, weddings, parties at your house, you know, private parties, you know, where you're not charging money and just inviting a certain number of people, private events. You know, places where anyone can come into, whether they buy a ticket or finagle their way through some system, generally public events. You know, as opposed to the liability piece, I'm going to pass that one back to you, Dave.
Oh, thanks. What kind of liability are we talking? Criminal, civil, what?
Both.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're the one running the event, you're going to have the ultimate responsibility. You want to make sure you're insured for this kind of stuff. And normal policies are not going to insure it because it's illegal federally. It's illegal. But you can, like I said, I co-own a warehouse with someone where it's rented out, and there's a grow inside the warehouse, and you know, I had the first person who insured it. They were paying $2,800 a year for insurance. They said, I just want property insurance, and of course, I then told the agent what was going on in there. He hooked me up with Lloyd's of London, and when I explained everything I wanted coverage for, basically if anything goes wrong, my building doesn't, you know, gets repaired. The premium is $8,400 a year. So you can buy it, and they're going to charge you for it. And is there any more risk? No. What their risk was they were afraid if the DEA raided and they did damage to the building, would that be covered? And I wanted that coverage. Because if they knock down doors, I don't want to replace doors. I just don't want to do it. And, you know, I'm poor. So I want to have my insurance company do that. And I want to make sure when something happens, my insurance company pays for it. So
what would the normal policy cost have been?
28.
So it's triple.
Yeah, and I didn't have a problem paying it. I just said, okay, fine, come to my office, I'll write you a check. Because I knew on the first policy it wasn't covered. DEA goes in the building for whatever reason, because you have to worry about the DEA. You do. And they go in the building for whatever reason, you know, right, wrong, and different. You can't sue the government for what they did. So you want to make sure you're taken care of on that. And criminally, like I said, you know, you won't be on the other end of a criminal case where someone wants to hit you for doing something like what happened to Jane down here, where she got the misdemeanor for not having the alcohol license. She got it because she was running the event.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have gotten single event insurance for one single day, somewhere around, like, depending on the number of people, like $200. So I also got an additional policy through Lloyd's of London for $103 for each one of my events, covering a general cannabis use. And then on the website, when you click to buy a ticket, you also had to click acknowledging, like, that it was written by a lawyer, so it was long and boring. But it was just saying that, like, marijuana is, I acknowledge I'm going to consume marijuana on my own, and that the risks of it are not da-da-da. So that was the best that I could do to make that happen. I know currently at Adiago Bread and Breakfast and a few other of these private venues, there are, like, signature things they make you sign acknowledging that you're consuming cannabis there, and that you're taking on that liability on your own. I don't know where they got the legalese for that. But yeah, so that's what I did.
Moving on. This is probably more a question here, I would guess, for Jane, or possibly Josh, you might know the answer. But what current venues are allowing cannabis-friendly events?
So,
I sense some hesitancy.
well, yeah. So currently, I have found the most success in truly private events. So cannabis business owners, as well as a few other private clients of mine that want to do an event where they know every single person at the event and they pay a flat rate, or not a flat rate, but like they pay for the entire budget of the event plus my fee for throwing it, and we host a party that way. And that way, there's no advertising for it, no one knows about it, there's no tickets, and everyone there is a private guest of this individual. And that's really the way that it's most comfortable right now. The catch for everyone in this room is that it's hard to make money that way, because it's much easier to have like a ticketed event where people sponsor it and you get to try all these different foods and tastes and things. I mean, there's really no way to make cannabis events more boring than to have a panel of 5 lawyers talking about it. But really, these events are amazing and can be very fun and like showcase the very best that Colorado has to offer in arts. I mean, the gentleman sold a lot of art in his gallery on the evenings that we had those events. People consuming cannabis have increased smell, increased taste. Their pupils are dilated. It's true, and graphic imagery really does come in a much more effective manner. Other people are more affected by their sound. That's why each of the event I designed was designed to cater to all 5 of your senses, because depending on the type of cannabis you consume and your own body type, you'll have your senses affected differently. But I know all of you know a lot of vendors who would love their services, their musical abilities, their artistic abilities showcased at an event where all of the people have heightened senses, want to taste the food, want to listen to the music, and want to participate in everything Denver has to offer.
If someone claims that they have a prescription for marijuana, can they legally share it with anyone? Well, technically it's not a prescription, but you know, that's why we have 3 of you here, not me.
Yes, under Amendment 64, someone can give marijuana away for no remuneration. You know, so if someone has marijuana, you can give it to a friend. Now, the problem was that a bunch of people were like, oh, I can give marijuana away, so I'm going to, you know, offer my dishwasher repair services on Craigslist for $50 and then give them a free bag of marijuana. Well, that doesn't count. You know, like no bartering, like any sort of service that's provided in exchange for marijuana counts as payment, and you can't do that. But you can give marijuana away, you know, to someone over the age of 21.
The next thing we're going to go here kind of goes something we touched on before about if you are at an event and if you are, for instance, well, I'll read it exactly here the way it's worded. What are the consequences for serving marijuana edibles to wedding guests as dessert? If I put signage out notifying everybody, is that better? Cupcakes, self-serve, etc. And I know it's kind of the same theme, but
okay, so first of all, you would not serve them as dessert. You would serve them as an amuse or as like the first thing people have, because they take a while to set in and you want to serve them on an empty stomach. Based on our focus groups, our extensive focus groups. But
these focus groups occur at Grateful Dead concerts?
No, in Cherry Hills. But honestly, it's just all about proper labeling and dosing. And that's why I highly recommend, if you are going to serve edibles at a private event, that you serve pre-packaged edibles that are made by one of the many, many amazing companies in town. I recommend Julie's Baked Goods. She does everything with a butter extraction, which is the most like natural, holistic way of pulling the THC out of the cannabis. And so you know exactly what that dosage is, because those edibles are tested and they are very reputable and very reliable. So I would serve a prepackaged edible in the package. Just display it as nicely as you can inside the package, and then everyone knows exactly what they're getting and they can choose from that. And that's what I would suggest. And then also just make sure you have plenty of non-alcoholic options. I mean, Abby and Three Tomatoes put into our menu, I mean, people get thirsty. Dry mouth is a natural, normal side effect of consuming cannabis. And so at all of our events, there is there are copious amounts of non-alcoholic refreshing beverages. And I don't mean bottles of water. I mean water stations with like an infused water or a sparkling soda bar or something with like a coffee bar. Anything that's just like hydrating and refreshing but doesn't have alcohol in it. That's what I would encourage you to do. What's going to happen is everyone's going to take an edible and you just get nervous. It's not normal to be at like a social event without a bottle of something to drink in your hand. And everyone's going to want to have a drink. And I would just encourage you to have them consume and then have water, enjoy the evening, and avoid alcohol.
We were talking on the side here. You can't sell someone marijuana unless you're licensed by the state, right?
No, absolutely. Well, he said for a wedding.
Right. So if you're charging for your event and part of what you're providing is marijuana, you're in trouble. That's a red flag, right? So if you're saying, oh, come to this event and you'll get a champagne toast and an edible, you're charging for marijuana and you're in trouble. I think
I agree. I totally agree with that. I was assuming for like a wedding, we have done like a bridal shower.
Right, so if people aren't paying for people can't be paying you to get marijuana.
Paying
if you're
at all, right.
Right. So I just wanted to.
Yes,
You know that,
no,
yes.
And closely related to this, Josh, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick. I mean, I think two just pointers. I mean, you have to make sure people have a ride home from the event. You know, because as, you know, I don't know if David wants to talk about it again, you know, there could be liability if someone, you know, uses marijuana at your event and then gets in a car accident on the way home. Second, you know, you have to make sure, like, people interact with edibles differently. And so you want to make sure that you have low-dose edibles, you know, that are not very strong. You want really the weakest edibles you can find, because people can always eat more, but they can't eat less.
So also locally Uber, you can prepay your codes so that you build it into like the ticket cost so that every single person already has their Uber paid for. It's not up to them whether or not they're going to use it. And it's part of the ticket cost. So then they would enter it in that night and that would be a way of guaranteeing that they're going to take that Uber home.
Uber being a taxi service.
Yes.
Okay. As this one's closely related, it basically, as a planner, what happens if somebody lights up or hides edibles or brings them in and you weren't aware of the fact they were going to do this, and all of a sudden here you are, the event planner, are you required to contact law enforcement? Should you do nothing? Should you pretend you don't notice? When do they have knowledge? Okay, so say we're all sitting here,
Working?
and you know, Corky, you and David are the bride and groom, and you light up. You light up. So everybody in the room can see, because this is just after your best man's given a very embarrassing speech, and everybody can see that you're lighting up. So at that point, is the event planner, are you required to do anything?
No. Absolutely not. If I, you know, personally, you don't have any duty to call law enforcement. It's not like that you're watching a guy drown, you should just, you know, save him. It's a famous law school question, actually. You see someone drowning in a pond, and you do nothing. Do you have any duty to that person to save him? The answer is no. And it's horrible, but you have no duty. You don't have to call law enforcement. You don't have to do anything. If I was the event planner, I would do what, you know, Ms. West said, and make sure they had a ride, make sure, you know, they were taken care of. I would look after their safety and their, you know, get them home safe was what I would do. You tell them, you know, especially if they're staying in a local hotel, you make sure they get there. That's what I would do as an event planner, and they probably thank you the next day for taking care of them.
Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, and then we have a follow-up here from the audience to the question before, asking what happens if your clients light up. And this person asks, as a venue owner, do you have any liability if you noticed your guests are lighting up? As the venue owner, not the planner, the person who actually owns the property. And I know we discussed a little bit out there about, you know, Obama's new appointee recently to replace Eric Holder. I saw on the news today is a big fan of civil asset forfeiture, which is a very bizarre area of law where the property becomes the defendant and can't testify for itself. This would maybe be a good one for you to answer, Sam.
Sure, and I think you hit on it there. The real concern here might be one of your corporate policy. That if you're, I heard Marriott has a non-smoking policy, they probably have a drug-free policy as well, and you might feel that you need to enforce that policy. Part of the reason those policies are in place is that the use of marijuana is still illegal. The possession of marijuana is still illegal, and as far-fetched as it might be, there is this remote possibility of either criminal or civil enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act. And as you point out, the civil enforcement provisions include the forfeiture of property that's used in the commission of a violation of the Controlled Substances Act. So this is why corporations have, in some cases, overprotected themselves by saying, we have a zero tolerance policy, and the reason we do is because we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we might risk the prosecution of our employees or the loss of some of our assets.
That's true. Very true. I mean, I will say, though, that
But
here in Colorado, to the extent that a business has allowed someone to use marijuana on that property, I have not seen a single federal case. Whether that's, under the RAVE Act, which makes it illegal to throw an event where you knowingly have people using drugs, or whether it's a civil asset forfeiture case under federal law. So I haven't seen that here in Colorado. I really haven't seen it anywhere, but I haven't seen everything. So technically, yes, there's a possibility. Practically, it happens every day. And so at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, like, are you just being hypersensitive to possible but mostly theoretical risk? But I can't encourage you to violate the law.
So kind of here's kind of an interesting question from the audience here, and I actually am not sure the answer to this one myself, as much as I've dealt with this. Is there a marijuana roadside test?
No.
That's what I thought, but
well, I mean, and Sam can definitely jump in a little bit more, but they have, what they call drug recognition experts, that are trained to identify if someone is high. And whether or not, like how effective they are or not, is debatable. I mean, a lot of the cases, at least I've seen in Colorado with people getting in trouble with using marijuana while driving, it's because, they have the joint in the ashtray, they have the bowl in their hand, it smells like marijuana is piling out of the car, is generally what I've seen, but there's no like specific test to test someone on the roadside. And so what they do is if they have probable cause to believe that you are impaired under marijuana, then they arrest you and they take you, is it to a hospital or? They take you somewhere to do a blood test.
An ER, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
And there was some talk about having mobile, sort of testing labs, but I don't know if that ever came to be.
Yeah, open container laws actually apply to marijuana, so you can't have your marijuana in sort of the center console and say, oh yeah, it's sitting there, but I wasn't using it. It has to be out of your immediate reach and control. And Corky, I'm sure, knows about this. The driving under the influence piece of the marijuana legislation was the most contested and most difficult piece to get passed. I think it passed on its fifth attempt, the fifth time. The reason for that is that marijuana and alcohol work really differently in the body. That alcohol, there is a direct link between your blood alcohol content and your level of impairment. If you're at 0.2, you're impaired, right? It's more than twice the legal limit, you're impaired. You can be, there's a 0.05, and I always get this wrong, nanograms per milliliter of blood. That's the test for impairment in Colorado. The correlation between that blood level and impairment is very poor. If you're a chronic user of marijuana, if you're a medical patient, you may always have that much active THC. It's not even a joke. You may always have that much in your system. That does not necessarily mean that you're impaired at any time, but you may test impaired and have to argue that although I had that much THC in my system, I wasn't impaired at that time. So I don't know if you want to talk about that process. There really was a sense, both on the task force and then I think in the legislature, that there had to be a new rule on the books, in part to show the federal government we were taking driving under the influence very seriously. I don't think anyone that voted for it really felt, oh, okay, this is the best policy, or this policy makes perfect sense. But the sense was, we have to have a policy in place. Let's take this one because it's less bad than all the other ones.
And what is the amount? It's 5, isn't it?
0.05 nanograms per milliliter of blood.
0.05.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to add on to that real quick, I mean, it's no one really knows when you hit 0.05 nanograms. You know, but the sort of rule of thumb by some tests, you know, done with, you know, GW Pharmaceuticals and other folks that have tested this is if you don't use marijuana and you have no marijuana in your system, you generally drop below 0.05 after 3 or 4 hours after you use marijuana. However, you know, like Sam said, if you use it a lot or you use it chronically, you know, that number, you know, varies widely.
I have a personal friend who's a cancer patient. He had 3 types of cancer, and he consumes quite a bit, like maybe in the range of a couple ounces a week, and he was literally hundreds of times over that amount. And absolutely, he could carry on a conversation, he could drive, he could walk, you know, and so I mean, it's a very arbitrary and unfair mark. Unlike alcohol, which will not stay in your system. I mean, if it was like you could have a BAC of 113. It just doesn't correlate. This is a question for you, Jane. Is there a future in catering and/or restaurants serving cannabis-infused foods? What are the challenges you think they might face?
I hope there is. I absolutely do. I really do believe that for people who are really dedicated to their art and craft of food and ambiance and all of those elements, I think that cannabis is an excellent option for alcohol. I mean, alcohol is so prevalent in our society. It's something that is part of every single business meetings, celebrations, where, I mean, it's something that's utilized all the time, and it's becoming more and more apparent to me that I didn't even notice before. And I really believe that as people start to use cannabis as an alternative, that I hope restaurants, caterers, I mean, the cooking, I mean, most of the chefs I know and most of the people in the restaurant business are definitely very, like, they tend, I mean, in my experience, they're cannabis users. That's it. I don't know how else to say it. Whatever. And a lot of the chefs, and I am actually speaking with chefs, with like Food Network chefs that are very excited to have it be like, the secret ingredient is cannabis, and like have everyone try to cook with it. And it's not that hard. I mean, it's great to have a class. What I actually really think is going to happen first, because it's easier to do, is that there'll be classes, which are currently occurring, where you educate people on how to create your own cannabis-infused foods. Also, if you are going to do something, I think it's all about dosing and having it all be served right and having it all be out there. And so that is the element that's going to be a challenge. And it's not worth it. Like, if a restaurant were going to serve cannabis, then you would be distributing cannabis without like a license, which is illegal. And there's no reason to push it to that limit at this point. I mean, there's so many other things we're trying to accomplish here that are much more important that we need to pass first. But I do think that that is in the future.
Okay, and we have kind of 2 follow-ups to a previous question here, and that is involving, again, since you can have a wedding and everybody can drink, what should an event planner advise to their clients if they want to do, whether it's giving out in a gift bag, giving it out, how should they advise their clients what liability they're facing? And I know we've kind of answered this 3 different ways, but this is for event professionals. So this is a very key problem for them. Go ahead.
Well, I would love to know. So my answer would be that you should not distribute cannabis in any form, and instead, if you have a dispensary that would want to sponsor your event, just like dispensaries are currently sponsoring festivals up in the Highlands all the time, then they should get a coupon for whatever item you want everyone to consume, and they should visit that dispensary, get to know the owner, it's part of sponsoring it, and pick up that item on their own. And that's what I would recommend. The dispensaries are allowed to issue gift cards, and you can also have coupons along those lines, which is a great way to have someone know your local dispensary and get whichever product they think is best for them.
Okay, and we're going to kind of wrap it up here. So if I would like everybody to kind of make a closing comment, kind of any additional things you might have liked to add. You want to start with Corky on the end?
My message to you is to get involved and get to know the people that you elected in the legislature, because again, they're the ones that set the public policy. They're the ones that create it, and they create it through people like you getting involved with them, helping them draft that public policy, passing that public policy, putting it in statute, which then in turn is the rules of the game for all of us. But each one of you have the power to be involved. Each one of you have the power to have a direct say in the quality of your life and the health of your business. So I'd encourage you to get involved.
On that note, I completely agree with Corky. You have to basically help the state legislature make laws that lawyers like us three up here can then interpret for you, and then judges will interpret into case law. And I think all the changes you want to see, like the restaurants being able to serve cannabis, that can happen. You know, but the Jane point was a lot of other things that have to happen first, of course, but someone has to take the first step. Someone has to go up to the state legislature, and I've told Corky this before. I've been up there in the past, and you'd be surprised how receptive the legislators are. They really want, if you go up there and you treat them with respect, and you write down what you want to say and say, hey, I want to, this is what I like to do, they'll listen to you. The person will listen to you, and that's the best thing you can possibly do is I would like to see, you know, everyone get involved. I'd like to see it become legal federally. That's going to take, you know, a ton of lobby money for that to happen. I can see a lot of things, but someone has to take the first step, and I think firms like Vicente Cedarberg, the partner to my left here, is a great asset for that to happen, because they're on the forefront of this. And what they do really is, you know, everyone goes, wow, that seems sort of simple. No. What they did was a ton of work. And then I asked Josh a question about this open and public use, you know, because of course they helped write the amendment, and of course that was put in there to get it to pass. You know, like I mean, I'm sure if I personally don't care. You know, smoke pot on the street. What's even that in a cigarette? To me, it's the same thing. And you know, you look at the bars that have, you know, they have little balconies, people drinking beer. But they had to do that as a first step to get it moving, and now we have momentum. You know, a firm like his can definitely go up there and with the state legislature and do the changes you guys want to see. And hopefully you're not in our offices talking about something that we could have changed the state legislature level, because that's a lot cheaper actually than the alternative.
You know, the world's changing, and one day we're going to see, you know, marijuana, you know, it'll be at the hotel, you know, it'll be in your hotel room at the minibar. You know, it will be, you know, there'll be marijuana bars. There'll be, maybe on the pillow. You know, you know, like the world as we know it's changing. You know, just, you know, in the last 3 weeks we've doubled the states that have legal recreational marijuana. It's going to be no time, you know. It could be a while, but before we know it, you know, we're going to see this legal at the federal level. We're going to see this legal in other countries, you know, and with that is going to come many, many opportunities. And what the marijuana experience looks like for adults, I think, is yet to be defined. And you know, I think there's massive amounts of opportunity there. And so, you know, I would just say this, you know, at the end of the day, just keep your eyes open and pay attention, you know, as this changes. And maybe there's a spot for, you know, a specific event or a specific catering company, or maybe there's not. But either way, things are going to be different in the future, and so I'd just say pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I'll sort of echo what people have been saying, which is we're living in a time where this is changing. When I talk to people, they say, well, what is marijuana law reform like? And I think in a lot of ways it's like the marriage equality movement, that you saw it, the enormous changes that have happened in the last 15 years for both issues, that no one thought either of them would change as fast or as broadly across the country as they have. Now, the current situation, and I talk in a lot of these panels, and often we're talking about how difficult it is to run a marijuana business because it's a cash-only business, and you have to pay taxes in unusual ways, and you can't get banking, and you can't get insurance the same way other companies can. And so the current moment is uncertain. You guys asked us a lot of questions, and you got a lot of, well, it depends, and we don't know, or there aren't any cases about that. And I could see you, even with the bright lights, I could see people rolling their eyes saying, well, thanks, lawyers. And it's not that they got bad lawyers, it's that we are living in uncertain times. And that makes it hard to be the first people to act. But you know, the people at Josh's firm and the people that they represent were some of the leaders in this. They were there first, and you know what I tell people is someone's going to get really rich, right? The people that figure this out and figure out how to serve this industry, how to serve these interests, are going to make a lot of money for themselves. And right now, there are risks associated with that. So it's about people thinking about those, managing those risks, and positioning themselves for when Josh talks about the prohibitions go away.
I would say that if you haven't tried cannabis, you should try it. Number one, you should try it. It's completely legal to go into. You should. How many of you have been in a dispensary? Raise your hands. Come on. Okay. So half the people in the room maybe have, and then there's some secrets because your boss is sitting next to you. You haven't even been to a dispensary yet. And I actually, my office is near a dispensary, and so I hear people going in. I hear what they talk about the hallway down when they go in, and then I hear what they're talking about the whole hallway down when they come back out. And first of all, go into a dispensary and see what it's like. Then buy some cannabis and then try it. And then talk about it and talk about your experience and what it was like and come out of the closet. Secondly, then, make them try to do new things and make them say you can't do that. So we've held 3 events and then they were like, nope, you can't do that anymore. So I'm like, well, what if we partner with the symphony? Then can we do it? And what if we get these guys at Vicente Cedarburg to kind of help us out there? Well, then can we do it? Well, yes, then you can. And we kind of keep slowly pushing the envelope and normalizing cannabis use. And I would also recommend to just get connected, and I'd like to plug Women Grow. We meet the first Thursday of every month. You can go to womengrow.com and sign up on the newsletter. We're in 16 states now, including Guam and Jamaica and Alaska. And there's a lot of very highly motivated female entrepreneurs that want to enter in this field. And the people in this industry, they need admins, HR, marketing, digital media. There's a lot of people I work with that do and don't use cannabis. But right now is the time to get in on the ground floor. Your knowledge after just 1 year of working in the scene in Colorado and marijuana will be invaluable in any other state coming on, because you will have worked in a dispensary or worked in a place where it's completely normal and seen the systems and seen how it worked. And so I just highly encourage you, if you're looking for a change of pace or want to get fired from your job, and just really consider the cannabis. It's not a joke. This is a real incredible business with incredible entrepreneurs. The best thing I did was get into this business because of the people that I work with now. They are all incredibly passionate, incredibly political, engaged, high energy people, and I love it because of the people, and I encourage you to learn more about the industry.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all our panelists. Encourage you, if these people can help you with what you're trying to do. Get to know them, get to know what they do, and I know everybody's had an introduction here tonight. I would like to close, and we should all be glad we're in such an exciting time, and these opportunities are huge. Thank you.